Theodore Roosevelt once said, "The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena,
I believe there's a hero in all of us.
so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who know neither victory nor defeat,
Seize the day.
whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who knows the great enthusiasms, the great devotions, and spends himself in a worthy cause,
And I'm gonna stay right here and fight for this lost cause.
who at best, if he wins, knows the thrills of high achievement, and if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly."
I'm gonna show you how great I am.
Boeing's 737 MAX, once the fastest-selling jetliner in Boeing history, now cleared again for takeoff after two deadly incidents. October 29, 2018, a Lion Air flight departing from Jakarta, Indonesia, plummeted into the Java Sea. 189 souls aboard perished. Just 4 months later, 157 people were killed when an Ethiopian Airlines flight crashed. Both incidents blamed in part on flight control software called MCAS.
So it was MCAS, it was the computer against the pilot.
Yes, and the way MCAS was designed, it was given the control authority to do it as many times as necessary. In other words, it was given the power to try to kill them, essentially, until it finally succeeded.
Boeing's fleet of 737 MAX aircraft grounded worldwide, prompting a congressional investigation and a criminal investigation by the Department of Justice. Amin Tamrat lost his father on the Ethiopian flight.
What really shocks me is their greed. I don't know how they can still, sleep at night.
Since then, Boeing told ABC News they have made a series of meaningful changes to strengthen our company's safety practices and culture. As well as updating the flight control system, MCAS now relies on 2 sensors and will only activate a single time, and pilots will also be required to complete flight simulator training.
I do think the 737 is a safe airplane. This MCAS thing was bad. I think that trust is going to be really hard to get back at this point.
Families of those who died in the crashes are outraged. Nadia Milleron and Michael Stumo lost their daughter, 24-year-old Samia, in the Ethiopian crash. They have filed a wrongful death lawsuit against the company.
This is Samia's room. I can't believe that this is remained untouched for more than a year. I look for Samia all the time. I call Samia. Sometimes I'm in the house by myself. I just shout, "Samia, Samia, where are you? Where are you, Samia?" But Boeing took her.
These are the tragedies that live in the lives of those who were part of 2 of the worst airline disasters in world history. And we still have to ask ourselves if indeed, as we heard in that report from ABC News, if Boeing, the Federal Aviation Administration, and those involved still have done what is necessary and have created an aircraft that is now safe to fly. Because if you look deeper into what has happened since those accidents, as the 737 MAX prepares to fly again on a regular basis in many cities, people are going to start wondering if indeed they can fly and feel safe. Hi, once again, everybody. I'm Ed Berliner. Welcome into another edition of The Man in the Arena. Thank you so much for joining us. Don't forget, you can catch us live on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. When the show is finished, you can watch all the shows and all the episodes at welcometothearena.com and hear all of the audio on all of the major audio podcast platforms. We thank you so much for joining us. This is a story that I have followed now for several years. And as I follow the story, I continue to look for the truth. And there are so many people who say they know the truth. But in reality, what they give us are little more than words from Boeing and FAA. It's time now to talk to someone whom we did back in April of 2019, who knows the aircraft well, who knows the airline culture better than anybody, and knows really from the ground level the truth about what happens in airlines and in airline culture. He is retired from United Airlines as a wide-body captain. He spent 40 years in a career that started with TWA. He worked at Boeing. He was part of the first group of training captains with the 787 and the 777. He has a degree in aerospace engineering. He is mechanic qualified. He is the winner, the recipient of the FAA's Wright Brothers Master Pilot Award, which means this is a gentleman who knows more about the aircraft than some people who probably built it know. And he is considered by many to be the top aviation expert in the world. And that's why he is here today to talk to us. It is a pleasure to welcome Captain Ross Amer to the Man in the Arena. Captain Amer, it's a pleasure to see you again. Thanks so much for being here.
It is my pleasure, Ed. Good to see you again.
We have so much to talk about, and we have just prefaced it by at least giving us that starting point, because the 737 MAX is back in the air on a very limited basis. But I think maybe where we need to start is reminding people of where we are and what got us here. 2 crashes, 346 people killed in these aircraft disasters that didn't have to happen. And let's start there. Is it not fair to say that the technology had brought us to a point where the aircraft itself, without certain modifications and maybe tinkering, if you will, they should not have fallen from the sky?
Absolutely, Ed. I think that little clip that you showed, and my friend Sully Sullenberger said it best, it was designed to kill you, kill the pilots, kill those 346 souls. And that shouldn't have happened in this day and age. We have the greatest technology available to us. We've come a long way since the days of recip engine aircraft, which used to crash so often. So this was absolutely unnecessary.
When we start talking about unnecessary, I guess what we need to do is deal a little bit in the history of the 737 MAX. And you and I have had a chance to talk about this. This was a very serviceable aircraft that many pilots seem to have a tremendous amount of trust in. Is it fair to say that, as we begin this discussion, that all of these various improvements that were made, and we're going to talk about humans as well involved in this, but were the improvements really necessary? The MCAS system, the one that the pilots fought and could not stop from driving them into the ground, was it really necessary to have these in the aircraft?
Yes and no, and I will explain that to the best of my ability.
Please.
Boeing, for 100 years, made the greatest airplanes ever known to mankind. I was privileged to have flown every commercial jet that Boeing made, from 707 all the way to 787, although I didn't get to actually physically fly the 787, but I was trained on it and instructed people. The 737 was the DC-3 of our age. What I'm saying is that it was the greatest airplane as far as carrying passengers from short haul to medium long haul. Initially, it was designed for about an hour flight and about 80 passengers. And Boeing kept stretching it because it was so successful. They had sold somewhere in the neighborhood of, I believe, 6,000 airplanes before the MAX came about. And what they did, they kept stretching it and making it better and better for the airlines, for the passengers. But I believe that this last one was just one too many. You and I talked in private for a while, and I equated that for the car guys to putting a Hemi engine, 700 horsepower Hemi engine, in a Honda Civic. It's not going to work. It's going to tear that transmission apart. So this last stretch, which was a mistake by many in the industry, overdid it. And commercial airliners, by the FARs, by federal air regulations, they have to have inherent stability, which means If you do nothing, don't touch anything, that airplane will eventually seek a safe and level flight. And majority of Boeing airplanes were designed like that, just about everyone, including the 737. Now, in military aviation, that's a little different story. A lot of the newer design aircraft, like the F-22, F-35, you can't fly them without a computer. In other words, there's absolutely no instability. If the pilot lets go, that airplane will crash like a rock. So they have basically computer stabilized the platform of this aircraft. With the MAX, because of the way they added these much bigger engines than normal, my understanding is that the first time the test pilots ever flew this airplane, it wanted to loop. In other words, it was so much power in this airplane. As soon as they added power, the nose came up in the air. And obviously, they said, this is unacceptable. We can't let regular pilots fly this thing. And then they came back in a hurry. They were in major competition with Airbus Neo, and Airbus Neo was kind of beating Boeing from being the number one. And they had to do something. And in a haste, they came up with this MCAS, which is absolutely a disaster.
This is a Band-Aid, then. What you're talking about is knowing full well that there is a structural issue here and a torque issue, if you will, and just instead of creating a different aircraft, or instead of staying within the parameters of the safety that you have in a certain aircraft, they just decided that this would stretch the capabilities of the aircraft beyond what it was designed for.
That is correct. And furthermore, I think, in my opinion, and many others, the worst thing Boeing did was they did not tell the pilots a word about this horrible system on this aircraft. And in the past, Boeing always gave us a flight manual with every possible information we needed. Pilots are curious. I think that's in our genes. We're very curious. We want to know the airplane we fly. And most of us, we go every way to find tidbits about that airplane, learn it, train ourselves to do the best job. In this case, Boeing absolutely kept that existent of this crazy modification from every pilot and airlines.
But if you look at it then, Captain, what's the advantage in doing that? Doesn't seem to me as if there is any at all.
Well, there is money. Airlines, as well as Boeing, any big business, they do everything for money. And you always hear CEOs of Boeing and airlines and related companies, they say, safety is our ultimate goal, is our number one priority. What they forget to tell you is that if it doesn't cost a penny. So if it costs them an extra penny, safety goes out the window. And Boeing tried to sell this airplane, that was their selling point, to some of their customers that like Southwest. By the way, I blame Southwest, Boeing equally in creation of 737 MAX. Southwest Airlines, the biggest operator of this jet around the world. The next one is Ryanair. Between these two airlines, they didn't want any other airplane. They wanted their single aircraft. That's their motto, and that's how they make their money, to operate a one type of aircraft. So they put a lot of pressure on Boeing to extend one more time the 737. And Boeing, the selling point was you don't have to train the pilots to fly this airplane, although it was kind of a brand new. A lot of difference in design within the cockpit, different wing design, different engine. They sold this as a selling point. You don't have to train your pilots. 1 hour of differences course on their iPad is sufficient.
I'm going to play devil's advocate. The pilots are professionals. They know their way around the aircraft inside and out. They are highly trained before they are ever put behind that yoke. What's wrong? What's wrong with an hour then of training on a piece of software? To some people, it doesn't seem like that big a deal because people learn software all the time in 30 minutes.
Well, that 1 hour was perhaps enough to know some of the subtle differences, simple differences in this airplane. Like instead of 18,000 pounds of thrust on each engine, now you're going to have 24,000 pounds of thrust. The wing is slightly different. There are certain, again, differences that you could learn. But the real culprit, the most important part, which is this MCAS, was totally omitted from that differences course. Now, if they had explained what this thing does, and again, go back to what Sully says, it'll kill you. It's designed to kill you. Pilots would have thought more about it, asked for more information, and perhaps they would have demanded for actual training in a simulator. So this was completely omitted from the 1 hour of iPad training.
Who makes that decision? That there's only so much time necessary? There has to be someone who eventually gets to the end of the day, and that's the man or the woman who makes that call.
The culture makes that decision, and it comes all the way up from the CEO boardroom, all the way down to the mid-level management. We heard during the investigation, the congressional investigation, we heard a lot about a fellow by the name of Mike Faulkner. He was the, I believe, chief standards captain for Boeing. Young guy with very little experience. That's another thing that just bothers the hell out of me, Ed. Boeing used to have guys like Jack Waddell and Tex Johnston as test pilots. These guys were legendary. They were amazing. Their background, their ability. And they would hire nowadays these guys, some fresh out of military, some off the street with very little background and experience in engineering and flying. In the old days, Boeing designed their airplanes from the inputs by pilots and aerospace engineers, aeronautical engineers. Mm-hmm. Nowadays, bean counters design airplanes and electronic engineers. I mean, this is crazy. So this fellow, Faulkner, was the one basically who said, no, pilots don't need to know this. We don't need to put that in our training manuals. That's what the standardization pilot does. They put up the training syllabus for the airplane.
That's
and give
criminal.
It to the customers.
Wait a minute, that's criminal if you think about it, because there are lives at stake. We're not talking here about making a widget that gets people to go ahead and inflate their Santa Claus at Christmas time on a 12-volt fan. We're talking about something that kills people here. So are we not then talking about a culture? And I want to get to the culture then with you as well. but a culture where, from the top on down at Boeing, the human factor, the human element, is never once considered or placed in their line of thinking, knowing full well that they've got human bodies at 30,000 feet and they can drop from the sky and kill them. That's astounding, Captain. Astounding.
It is. And from day one, I was saying what Muhlenberg did at Boeing, he should be tried for manslaughter of 346 innocent passengers and crews. There is no other way. They did it knowingly. They deceived people, pilots, and they killed people. I know that there's ongoing investigation by the DOJ, and I hope the new DOJ goes back and looks into this fairly. Somebody has to pay for this, not with money, because those people that you showed in that clip, those parents, those children of those people who got killed, they deserve justice.
So then, if we are to consider what we've learned thus far about the MCAS system, and every time you'll hear someone from Boeing or someone from the FAA discuss this, the first thing that will come out of their mouths is the MCAS system failed us. If you look at some of the simulations, you will see that the MCAS system kicks in not once, not twice, but every single time it is called on to correct the aircraft, which was part of the problem in the Ethiopian crash, where when they tried to shut the power down and shut down MCAS, they were already in trouble, and then they tried to bring the aircraft back online electronically. MCAS kicked in again, and in many ways, as Sully Sullenberger said, tried to kill them. So
right.
We remember all that in this context then, as people say it is the MCAS system that caused this. Is that not a cover-up and a lie?
It is, absolutely. And the principal problems with this aircraft have not been addressed. The problems, MCAS is still there. Now, although they turned it down a little bit, they limited the authority to one-time interference. But, as far as I'm concerned, this is just a different shade of lipstick on a pig. This airplane, initially when FAA was looking into it after I believe the first crash, they said if we don't do anything, there'll be 15.1 accidents in 10 years on this aircraft. Imagine that. Try to sell that to those people who died in those crashes or who will die. So I don't know. Mr. Steve Dickerson, the FAA administrator, did a photo op flight on this thing. He's a pilot. He was a former Delta management pilot, not liked from what I hear. The funny thing was, before he went on this test flight, he claimed that he flew it himself. The caption was, "This is not a photo op." Did they have to actually say that? You wonder why. And he came back and says, "Oh, it's perfectly safe. Perfectly safe. I'll put my family on it. Do it, buddy. Let's put your family on this thing all the time."
I want to get to that in a moment with regard to the safety factor now as people watch us and listen to us and consider that as this aircraft goes more into service again, there is a great chance that they are going to have to make a choice, and people are going to have to, more than ever before, now ask the airline when they make the reservation, what aircraft are you flying? I've never thought once about asking that. I don't think anybody in society thinks about that when you're making a reservation or looking. Now you've got to look and see. Before we get to that on the safety side of things, and as you talk about the FAA, The FAA is the government regulatory body that is supposed to be there to hold the feet to the fire of companies such as Boeing, Airbus, whatever you want when it comes to American aviation. They set the standard. With all that we've learned thus far, is it fair to say that the FAA is just as complicit in the deaths of these 300 plus people as Boeing or anybody else?
Absolutely. FAA was looked at by the rest of the world. Like you said, they set the standards for not only in US, but the rest of the world. In this case, they miserably failed. The symbiotic relationship between Boeing and FAA, they were just rubber stamping things. And they're definitely culprit in this. It was ironic that Chinese were the first country to ground the MAX. And I think it was the day after the first crash, or excuse me, the second crash, their national TV called me. They did an interview. Unfortunately, it was in Chinese through an interpreter. So I didn't even look at it. I don't have it. But I explained to them my feelings about it. And I heard the next day they grounded all 737 MAXs. And then other countries followed. United States was the last in the world to finally ground these airplanes under pressure, extreme pressure from everybody. So this is very sad and embarrassing.
When we look at that, when you look at the FAA then, who's supposed to be the last line of defense, if they do not then make this decision, knowing full well the evidence that sits in front of them, is it possible, I'm going to throw out a few things here, is it possible that one, they didn't know nor didn't have the imagination to consider that the MCAS was this much of an issue? Two, that they were getting a tremendous amount of pressure from within the United States government, not to say anything at all to embarrass an American company? Or three, just cowards at the end of the day who simply didn't want to be the ones to hold up their hand and say, we've got a problem here, which seems to be rampant in United States politics these days. Or I have a feeling you're going to say, Ed, all of the above.
I was going to say, Ed, I love multiple choice questions, and the answer D, all of the above. Absolutely. Wow. No question, all of the above.
How do we change? And again, this now comes to culture, as you spoke to earlier, and you and I have had a couple of conversations. What we have here is a culture of concealment that we have seen.
And greed.
Okay. Let's put greed under that culture of concealment. We create, and if we are Boeing, let's just say and extrapolate, we are creating the culture of concealment because if we don't conceal, then we're going to lose more orders for aircraft, our brand will suffer, and we will not be able to make as much money. So when you look at this culture of concealment, is it new? Did this all of a sudden come up here? I mean, it really looks as if everything was fine with Boeing for decades, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, hey, we got to stretch this aircraft and we got to make more money. It seems like it came as a snap. Which one is it?
Well, it came gradually, but there was a beginning point, an ignition called McDonnell Douglas. As I mentioned, Bill Boeing started Boeing Aircraft Company out of a storefront in Seattle, Washington. And for years, he made great airplanes. Now, there was competition in the 60s between several aircraft manufacturers, Convair, Douglas, later McDonnell, and Boeing. And McDonnell Douglas made fantastic airplanes, DC-10, DC-8, DC-9, which I flew all three of those airplanes, by the way, great airplanes. And I believe government basically forced the two companies, because McDonnell Douglas in Long Beach, they were in trouble. and they forced them to merge with Boeing. And they were the failing company, but somehow their management took over Boeing. And that was the end of a great manufacturing. One of the things they did, for example, I believe it was in the early 2000s, where they moved the corporation to Chicago. They're making airplanes in the Pacific Northwest. And by the way, that's another major problem that I have with Boeing. As soon as they moved the headquarters and the board of directors to Chicago, things changed at Boeing. You know, for years and years, for 50 or 60 years, where they were making these commercial aircraft in the Pacific Northwest, they have great bunch of employees. These are educated people, engineers, workers, family members who worked for Boeing. But damn it, they dared to be unionized. And Boeing didn't like that, or the new management, the new culture. They hated unions.
Again, a financial decision.
Again, a financial decision. And I was privy to what happened on the 787, because that was the time after I retired from United. They hired me in Boeing because they needed people with previous 777 experience. That was another selling point to the airlines. Give us your 777 pilot. In 5 days training, we'll give you a 787 pilot.
Is that, well, okay, stop you there. 5 days. Again, we're dealing with professional pilots here. But in your perspective and in your opinion, because you've been there, is 5 days enough?
No. We were a bunch of old farts from various airlines, mostly United. The other guys were absolutely marvelous pilots and experienced guys. I was always humble. Like I was embarrassed to stand next to some of these guys with their experience. But we were like the space cowboys. I don't know if you ever saw that movie. We should have said, that's BS. 5 days of training, difference is training. The only similarity between 787 and a 777 is that they have two engines. Entirely different airplane. One's a fully electrical airplane, one's a traditional airplane, even though fly-by-wire. They have a system on 787 called the HUD, heads-up display. That's usually in the military airplanes. That alone, learning the HUD for a new 787 pilot takes 5 days at least, just to get used to it. But we, I don't know why, we said, oh, yeah, we can do it. We can do this in 5 days. But what saved the day was the launch customer for 787, which was All Nippon Airlines, All Nippon Airways in Japan. When they send their initial cadre of pilots for training in Seattle, and they told them 5 days, they looked at this program and they laughed. They said, how about 5 weeks? It was that ridiculous. So it was, again, a decision, a sales gimmick to say 5-day training. So when the airlines hear that, they love it. The CEOs love that word. 5 days or no training at all? Give me more. So this was the problem with the MAX. They wanted to sell it as an airplane that you could just walk into, waltz into it, and fly it with no problem. But and that was the reason they kept the existence of this horrible system from everybody.
Is that part of the issue then here when it comes to aircraft as we move forward and we get to new generations of aircraft, that there is a perhaps an opinion from a younger generation that because of software, because of the computing power that there is, because of how we change the aircraft systems, that they will be easier to fly, that they will need less attention. I mean, look, if you look at what we're now launching into space, the Elon Musk craft, you have the pilots, they're basically sitting back and letting the computers do everything in a weightless environment. They're hands off and they do nothing. And that's one of the things that they're touting as being the future of space travel. Is it possible that we are simply looking at management that is being swayed by a younger generation, a computer generation that says, hey, don't worry about it. Come on, these old guys needed much more than we've got. We've got software and computers. We've got multiple terabytes in order to do this. This will work, we guarantee it. Is that possible, or am I just kind of extrapolating a little too far here?
No, it's definitely possible. In fact, that's what's going to happen eventually. You take the pilot out of the equation because we're human. We occasionally make mistakes. Computers usually don't make mistakes. They don't get tired. They don't have duty limitations. They don't ask for extra pay. They just do what they're programmed. But right now, as long as we don't have perfect AI in the system, artificial intelligence, you still need somebody to watch over the computers. And, like the 2001 Odyssey movie, when HAL went crazy and took over, somebody's got to be there to perhaps take care of it. But I'm afraid the next generation of airplanes, they're already working on a single pilot. I still fly a single pilot jet, Phenom jet, which I believe it's, again, the most dangerous thing in the world to do. An aircraft, sophisticated aircraft flown by one pilot. So yes, that is in our future. Hopefully you and I will not be around, but the next generation of commercial airliners will be perhaps one pilot, a monitor basically, not a pilot, a system operator, and the following one, there'll be no pilots.
This brings us then to the key in all this. The 737 MAX is flying again. The FAA is allowing it. Boeing swears in every statement that it is a safer aircraft. We have changed the sensors. We have changed MCAS. We are getting our pilots more training. We're doing everything that we felt, in essence, we're doing everything we failed to do the first time around that killed over 300 people. We learned our lesson. Did they? Is my biggest question to you, Captain. Did they really learn a lesson? Are we being fed more bovine excrement from the corporate chair? And is the 737 MAX any safer today than it was 2 years ago?
In my humble opinion, no. It is safer, but not safest. We want safest. In all Boeing airplanes, the newer generation, all the way from 747 to 787, everything has triple redundancy. They still, even after all of this, they're only using 2 inputs from AOA, angle of attack sensors, only 2 comparison instead of 3. And again, yes, they are adding some training, and it'll be safer, but not safest.
Is it possible then, with what we talked about earlier, how this is an aircraft that has been, and the concept is correct, stretched. They keep stretching the capacity of this aircraft. Is it fair to say that they have gone past the safety factor? They have, at this point, taken an aircraft that should not be flying in the condition that it is now, with the software that it is now, with the demands that is placed on it, plus the torque, the engines, everything else, that it simply should not be flying. And if Boeing wanted to create a safe aircraft, you need to create a new 737?
Clean sheet design is extremely expensive and time consuming. As we first talked about, they were in competition with Airbus Neo. They had to get something out pretty quickly. They had a very good chance at perhaps modernizing the 757, which would have been a perfect, not a clean sheet design, perfect candidate. But I guess, like I said, Southwest and Ryanair and a few others, they changed their mind on that. But if it was up to me, I would scrap all those things, eat the, by the way, I read somewhere that Boeing so far has lost $120 billion over this MAX issue. If they had spent tenth of that and started a clean sheet design, they would have been ahead.
And if they had started a clean sheet design, they would have been ahead, and they would have created a safer aircraft, yes?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So why then, in your opinion, would they not make that decision? Is it just knuckleheaded thinking that we can keep stretching and stretching until somebody dies? That seems to me to be so incoherently bad as far as common sense is concerned. But then again, I'm not sitting in the corporate chair.
Well, you and I are not. Neither am I. They're not asking me for any advice either. I get a meager retirement from Boeing. They probably cut it after this thing airs, and that would supplement my meager retirement from United Airlines, which they stole from me. That's another topic. But they would have definitely been ahead if by now they would have started a brand new design. Yes, they would have lost the market initially to the Airbus Neo because it was already there, but it would have been a brand new design, a much safer aircraft, and more economical.
And we're going to get there eventually anyway. Yes? I mean, aren't we really at a stage in aviation where if you look at what we're using now, we are probably in the next, I don't know, I'm going to throw this out, 20 years, going to see a time when most of these aircraft will have to be retired, and you will have to come up with new designs, which means you're going to have to start from scratch to begin with, because haven't they pretty much taken these aircraft and just stressed them to the point where there is only a breaking point that's left?
Yes. And, most aircraft manufacturers constantly evolve. I bet you right now there's a bunch of designers in Boeing designing the next generation of aircraft. So that happens all the time. They evolve into newer design. But this was, again, going back to our initial talk, it was today's profit, not thinking about tomorrow or next year. They just wanted to show a profit today. And just like with the 787, when they farmed out all the parts around the world and it came back and nothing fit. That's why 787 took 5 years to be certified. These are the decisions that you and I don't know. We don't understand.
So then, here's, I think, and I mentioned this briefly a little bit earlier, and I think we need to get there. You're the guy who knows these aircrafts inside and out. Would it be your suggestion at this point that every single time people fly, whether they do it on the web, whether they do it with a live person, you need to know the aircraft that you're flying, and you need to be completely aware more than ever before? And who knows, we may eventually get to a point where people may want to know who the pilots are and what kind of experience they're actually getting in the seat. But don't people now have a real need to know the aircraft they're flying?
They do. They do. That unfortunately, we as humans, regardless of our age, we have the attention span of a little toddler with a new toy. After about 5 minutes, we we forget and get tired of it. So initially, yes, people are going to do that, and some of them will probably refuse to fly on the Max. By the way, they've changed the name now. They won't call it Max. They're going to call it 787-8 or 9, whatever.
Oh,
Yeah,
gee, how nice
they're
of
going to
them.
change the they're going to change the name as expected. But eventually, people will forget, and the airlines will offer a lower fare temporarily, and I guarantee you, 90% of the people will run to it, forget all about it till the
Would you?
next accident.
What are they now? The 737 Max or the 787, whatever they're calling it at this point. Would you get on board one?
No. Thankfully, I don't have to fly anymore commercially. And if I don't see a airport, a passenger terminal for the rest of my life, I'd be the happiest guy in the world. But if I had to, I would not go on a Max.
Would you also recommend to your family and friends and people that you know and tell them strenuously, do not get on one, period?
Yes, correct. Because
And
like I said, they did a few things, made it safer, but it's not the safest.
and in telling people this, because I guarantee there's people watching this and listening to this who are going to say, Captain, come on, it's going to be safe eventually, isn't it? To which I guess we probably would say, have you not been listening to the last 45 minutes?
Exactly. Exactly.
Listen to what's happening here, because now the next step is then to see if indeed, and I think your point is well taken, will the FAA, will the government take any further steps? Will anybody actually be brought up on criminal charges? To which I think I can confidently say no, it won't happen, because as with so many other things, corporate America will bury this, money will bury this, political friendships and handshakes will bury this along the way, and we unfortunately have to wait for the next one, which I feel terrible saying out loud. But it seems as if, and I think we brushed upon this in final thought, we brushed upon this the first time we spoke. Isn't it just fair to say that this is a reactionary culture to begin with? Everything's fine. Everything's wonderful. Don't worry about it. Hey, we had a plane just crash and 200 people died. Oh, we better fix it now, guys, because it's all going to come down on our heads. It seems to me as if that's really got to be the reaction. And isn't it fair to say that's always been the reaction from not everybody in the airline industry? I don't want to throw this into everybody's lap here, but from certain people that have evolved in the airline industry, that has been and will continue to be their opinion and their commentary on all this. Yes?
Yes, absolutely. I agree.
Okay. Well, I want to thank you very much, because from now on I'm going to be taking my bicycle. It's going to be hell getting from South Florida to New York on those trips that I make back and forth to Boston. But I think my bicycle's looking better every single day. But I will say this
And
much.
you're going to be a better person. It's good for you, Ed.
Okay. See, there you go. That 1,500-mile trip will be perfect. I want to remind everybody here that Captain Amer does not appear as often as he used to in many of the networks, and he has been gracious enough to appear on this show simply because we have struck up a friendship here from the first time that we connected, and I constantly am reading things now. And I could, honest to goodness, Captain, you could do an hour show every week on air safety, and I don't think that would be enough for people to actually learn more. But I want to remind everybody that here's the way to get a hold of Captain Amer in social media. Go to his Facebook page. It is 777-PIC, or his Twitter page is at Ross Amer 777. Reminder also that he is the CEO of Aero Consulting Experts, a marvelous group of people that he has put together there who are truly the experts in their field. And it is at aeroconsultingexperts.com. And for those who use LinkedIn, a reminder that go to LinkedIn and search out Captain Ross Rusty Amer, and you will find his profile there, and I have a feeling that you're going to learn an awful lot that you didn't know before, and maybe you're going to be sorry you did, but trust me, you've got to know these things sooner or later, kids, because it affects us all. Captain, I really can't thank you enough for all this, and I want to tell you that I hope that the next time we speak, it's on something a little less dangerous, and we're able to talk.
So. I hope so, Ed, and I appreciate being with you. The reason I allowed myself to keep talking with you is that I'm kind of moving away more and more from big networks because the questions that they ask you are actually sometimes funny. With you, you know what to ask.
Thank you.
And we can talk reasonably well about a subject that most people don't know too much about.
As I like to tell people, I'm not an aircraft pilot, but I play one on TV. And that's about as close as I think I'm ever going to come. Captain, if you would stand by just a couple of moments here as we close out the show, I want to talk to you here on the other side very briefly. I want to thank you very much for your time. It has absolutely been a pleasure. I remind everybody once again, make sure that you follow the Captain on Facebook and Twitter as well. Learn more about the airline industry. You're going to need it. We are all going to need it as things change, and maybe push people in power to make the changes that will keep people safe on every single flight. Thank you so much for joining us. Thanks, everybody here. Until we meet again, right here on The Man in the Arena, I'm Ed Berliner. Rock on, true believers. See you. Be sure to stay connected on social media with questions, comments, conundrums, you name it. It's at Berliner Speaks on Twitter, Facebook, and on Instagram. A great place to talk business and learn a lot more about what we do is simply check us out on LinkedIn. Just go there and search out Ed Berliner. A reminder that every single episode of The Man in the Arena is uploaded to YouTube. Just go to welcometothearena.com, or if you're on YouTube, search out Ed Berliner Media. If you would prefer to listen to The Man in the Arena, every episode is available for download on all the major audio podcast platforms. The Man in the Arena is produced by Entourage Management, LLC and Entourage Media.